On Albino Abundance Trail, a Atramentus woman and her 11-year-old son heard a faint cry. They activate a little babe absent in the cold. Her ancestor abandoned further up the path. Braving the deepening weather, they helped them mobility safety. Months later, aback the woman was wrongfully accused. That ancestor and babe would be the ones to footfall advanced and defend her. Afore we begin, area are you watching from? Weed adulation to apprehend your thoughts. Help! The cry was attenuate and high, more breath than sound. A ward of fear tugged apart in the trees. Emily froze before the additional alarm cut sharper. A quick brand through the deadened calm of flurrying snow. She and her son had just left the weekend fair. She with the ache that consistently followed acceptable day sales. He with that extra animation from talking to grown-ups about baptized filters and headlamps, and were rolling the last crate adjoin the accessible bear of her battered Subaru aback. The wind shifted and agitated the articulation bottomward the slope. Did you apprehend that? Ben whispered, already blurred his affiliate cap and angling his anatomy adjoin the breach in the pines. Emily's Duke anchored on the crate handle, a reflex earlier than her business license, or the stenciled logo on the boutique accessory beneath her parka. The allotment of her that new mountain weather, how it lied, how it angry an hour into a hazard, answered afore her mouth did. She clicked the hatch shut, tucked the keys into a bridged she could reach with gloves on, and said, "Take the headlamp. Go slow. Follow my steps." This was their life. A baby outdoor shop in a boondocks that saw them Aboriginal as mother and son, and abandoned then, maybe as owners and helpers. Weekends loading tents and stoves and boxes of absolute socks into a car that coughed in the cold evenings, counting banknote with chapped fingers, and cogent anniversary added one good thing that happened that day. Today's good affair had been a biting beck of customers and a kid who'd adored his allowance to buy a compass. Now, the good affair was articulation they could not pretend not to hear. They slid off the shoulder of the backwoods alley and into knee-deep powder, the cops draped in a fresh calm that ate their footfalls. Ben moved the way she accomplished him. Delay low. Test the crust. Commit. His small shoulders box-like with the seriousness he wore aback the apple alleged him to be bigger than 11. The cry came again closer, and afresh the appearance of a little girl appeared area the aisle curled around a bedrock coat. Askew. One mitten afraid adjoin her aperture as if tears bear a lid, snow absolute her braids. "Hey there," Emily said, crouching to the girl's eye akin so the wind wouldn't abduct the charity from her voice. "I'm Emily. This is Ben. Are you hurt?" The babe befuddled her head, shivering. "Grace," she hiccuped. "Daddy slipped. He told me to delay by the stump, but the snow started, and I got scared, and I ran." The acknowledgement in her tone was earlier than 6. Emily acquainted the familiar arrow at the back of her neck. Not abhorrence exactly, but the faculty of alarm starting. Alga bites fast when panic opens the door. She ambiguous Grace's coat higher, took her cuff hand, and said, "We're activity to acquisition him. Ben, you go advanced area the aisle narrows. I'll be appropriate abaft you." As they climbed, the snow thickened from a more to intent, alarming alongside in a way that erased landmarks and fabricated the dupe look like a painter had bedraggled the world. They activate the man 10 account later where the aisle came to join a ravine, his aback propped to join a spruce, 1 foot bisected buried, the set of his jaw saying, "Do not see me like this." His coat was the affectionate that promised boardrooms added than aisle heads. His boots polished, the absolute about his collar already assault with damp. Relief flashed above his face aback Grace cried, "Daddy," and afresh something shuddered. It pried surprise. The quick inventory some bodies did aback admonition did not access an anatomy they'd expected. "I'm all right," he said, and the attempt to angle accepted him wrong. His weight bottomward on a burnished application and sending a blow through his abate that stole his breath. Emily stepped in and offered her arm afterwards commentary. He hesitated a bisected second, the micro-beat where actuality decides whether to accept an adaptation of themselves that needs someone abroad, and afresh grasped her form. "Easy," she said. Authoritative, her voice the calm he could angular on. "We'll take it slow, Ben. Give Grace your back for the icy stretch." Ben below with practiced economy, and Grace folded herself assimilate him, baby accoutrements affiliated at his chest like she'd accomplished for this. "The man Daniel," he said aback, she asked 40 by the attending of him, and accustomed that expensive calmness bodies buy with money, let Emily set their pace. She felt the way he fought the appetite to advance to argue with the area to pretend the pain in his abate was a rumor. Pride met gravity and force won every time. Emily didn't gloat. She had met humility in adamantine places and knew not to allocution over it. At the aisle arch a auto idled, heat blooming from the accessible cab. A man in a blubbery anorak jogged forward. "Hands out." "Lucky there was a dish nearby," he said, and his smile absorbed sideways, a to-ablaze antic aimed area it would bruise afterwards abrogation a mark. Not often you see a tremendous woman up actuality in this weather. The book affected to be weather talk, the way some bodies manage to constrict a adjudication central a compliment. Emily kept her face neutral, shifting her attitude to abiding Daniel as he stepped over a active route. She had a catalog for these moments. The soft barbs dressed in bounded color. The raised brows that asked who let you into our season, the acceptance that competence lived elsewhere. Every time she did the math, is this the time I absorb my breath? The wind needled her cheeks. Ben's amateur were still beneath Grace's weight. Daniel's blackout opened beside her like aperture edition band to walk through. He did not actual the man or offer a simple, "She knows these trails." He looked at the falling snow. Emily adapted her anchor and said nothing. Grace slid from Ben's back and pressed herself adjoin Daniel's side, her baby face blotchy from algid and tears, but safe. Emily watched the way Daniel's Duke anchored on his daughter's shoulder. The way he swallowed whatever acknowledgement he did not have words for. She acclimatized him into the warm cab, helped Grace in afterwards him, and stepped aback as red appendage lights bled into the white. The auto pulled away, swallowing the moment with it, and the woods alternate to the clean, quiet that followed. Storms and statements no one owned. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself that the point was the babe balmy in a cab and the father who had bending beneath by morning. But the words ashore in her throat like snow angry to ice. There was an amount to being the one who knew what to do and hearing the abruptness that you did. A cost to actuality competent in anatomy some people did not apprehend to carry competence. Amount to watching a man you had studied acquisition assurance in not seeing you absolutely. Ben came to angle beside her, his animation a anemic cloud. "You okay, Ma?" he asked in the accurate voice he acclimated aback. He knew the acknowledgement was complicated. She tucked a devious curl under his cap and Arya kindly. "I'm fine. We did good." He nodded, but his eyes backward on the abode area the truck had been, attenuated attending that said he had noticed the silence, too, and tucked it abroad in whatever baby vaults boys keep for a quaint they do not yet have language for. They absolved aback to the Subaru, the sky agglomeration to early dusk, the amphitheater lights blinking out one by one abaft them. Emily loaded the last crate with easily that still remembered the weight of Daniel's forearm and the exact angle his pride had bent. She anticipation of the customers who'd laughed with her that afternoon, of the brace who'd asked for admonition and then alternate to say the stove lit on the aboriginal try, of the old climber who tapped the adverse and said, "You run a tight ship." The boondocks captivated both types, and on best canicule the antithesis favored decent. The ambush was not to let the other moments calcify. She angry the key, coaxed the agent into life, and let the boiler ahem balmy air assimilate their hands. Snow feathered the windshield. "Hot chocolate?" she asked, aiming for light. Ben smiled afterwards, attractive away from the trees. "Extra marshmallows," he bargained, and she said, "Deal," because small rituals could be a shelter, too. As they pulled assimilate the road, the wind shouldered the car with the affectionate of warning the mountains gave to anyone who pretended they were in charge. Emily tightened her anchor on the caster and felt something in her settle, a quiet vow that had annihilation to do with weather reports. She would accumulate assuming up. She would accumulate actuality. The woman who knew what to do aback the apple went white. And if the abutting time the amiss affectionate of comment rolled off a stranger's argot and the nearest man chose to abstraction the snow, she would still be there, easily steady, voice, alike amore adamant, abundant to hold in a storm. 3 canicule later, the snow had eased into a breakable band that crackled underfoot, and the air carried that sharp, apple pie angle winter gets when the sun decides to shine. Emily was arranging an affectation of thermal gloves near the adversaback. The alarm over the shop aperture jingled. Grace slipped inside first, cheeks blushed from the cold, a small affiliate bandage of frayed in her hands. Daniel followed, alpine abundant to accomplish the shop feel smaller. His covering the kind that amount added than her account rent. He nodded, a affable activity restrained. "We came to say acknowledge you," he said, glancing adjoin Grace. The little girl smiled shyly afore afloat to the shelves of children's gear. Daniel set a small bag on the counter. "Items for Grace," he explained to accomplish her next hike, added comfortable. Emily captivated the purchases neatly, her fingers working while she noticed how his boring moved around the boutique over the exhausted pine floors, the shelves abounding with both high-end backpacks and bashful camping stoves. His eyes lingered on a framed photo of her and Ben from aftermost summer's community aisle cleanup. The edges of his announcement unreadable. Afore she could speak, the aperture swung accessible again, bringing in an access of wind, and a man in his backward 50s with a face asperous from years outdoors. He stomped snow from his boots and strode to the counter, giving Emily a glance that skimmed past her like she was allotment of the furniture. "This abode sells aggressive gear?" he asked, his articulation benumbed the band between joking and sharp. "I ample you folks just to wash the bargain stuff." The words landed lightly, as if tossed without thought, but the association was clear enough. It was the affectionate of dismissal she'd heard all her life, a question wrapped in condescension. Emily felt heat acceleration in her chest, but kept her tone even, her easily abiding as she folded a brace of gloves. "We backpack gear for every affectionate of hiker," she said, including the affectionate that lasts through more than one winter. She met his gaze, just continued abundant to let the words settle before she angry back to the bag. From the angle of her eye, she saw Ben freeze mid-motion as he stalked water bottles. His boring confused from the man to her, analytic for a able in her composure. She gave him none, but she felt the weight of his absorption shift to Daniel, as if silently asking, "Will you say something?" Daniel had heard it. She could acquaint by the slight about-face of his shoulders, but he abandoned offered the man a quick, about-atoning smile, followed by a low, aloof chuckle. The kind bodies used to accumulate the air light when they don't appetite to get involved. Then he alleged Grace over, assuming her a compass he'd best out, as though nothing abroad had been said. It was a small thing, about annihilation in the span of a day, but the absence of his voice settled in her chest like a abstract under a bankrupt door. She hadn't accepted him to owe her annihilation above acknowledgement for that day on the trail. And yet she'd hoped aloof a little that he might recognize how moments like these built up, how they wore a actuality bottomward, more than a distinct storm. She slid the bag of gear above the adverse with a polite nod, signaling that the transaction both kinds was over. Grace coiled from the doorway, ablaze and untroubled, and Emily coiled back. Ben backward abutting to her side, his eyes anchored on Daniel, narrowing not in dislike, but with the kind of attentive acquaintance kids develop when they faculty article isn't right. Emily didn't comment, but she noticed. 2 canicule later, Daniel alternate alone. The snow was falling agilely again, softening the edges of the alley outside. He stepped in with purpose, allurement about a backup allotment for his covering poles, and whether there was a safer avenue up to the backbone for Aboriginal Spring. Emily traced a avenue on the map advance across the counter, pointing to area the ice lingered longest, area the wind cut hardest. He listened, nodding, typing quick addendum into his phone. He never mentioned the amateurishness from the other day, never accustomed what she'd seen in his silence. The ambit was still there, polite, cool, intact. Back he left, the alarm over the aperture jingled, and the boutique acquainted quieter than it had all morning. Emily stood for a moment with her easily comatose on the map, the weight of implied things acute against her palms. Some storms didn't breach in a single day. Outside, Daniel paused before accepting into his SUV, glancing back through the Arctic glass. Inside, Ben was stacking boxes, his easily busy, but his eyes tracking the man until he drove away. It was aloof a flicker, but Emily bent it. A bashful agreement between mother and son that they were paying attention, alike aback others weren't. The wind was already sharpening by the time Emily bound the boutique that afternoon. The affectionate of dry, stinging gust that aching above a parent's skin like sandpaper. The anticipation had promised annihilation added than flurries, but the mountains had an addiction of turning small warnings into absolute trouble. She had almost slid into the amore of her truck aback her buzzed. An alert from the Bounded Accomplishment Network. School field crews abandoned on the ridge. Snow moving and fast. She didn't accept to read the agenda to apperceive Grace was up there. By the time she accomplished the rescue center, the air was blubbery with urgency. Volunteers confused like clockwork, hauling ropes, Aboriginal aid kits, and insulated blankets. Radios crackled with coordinates. The abode smelled of damp wool, wet leather, and algid metal. Emily had aloof shouldered her backpack aback. She spotted him. Daniel continuing at the map table, jaw set, articulation low, and clipped as he battened with the coordinator. When he looked up, the accepted affable distance in his eyes was gone. What replaced it was raw, accessible concern. She's in the group, he said, as admitting Emily didn't already know. The plan was simple. Daniel with the West Isle team, Emily with the North. But the West aggregation was short a person, and back assignments were shuffled. Their names landed side by side. Neither argued. This wasn't the time for pride. They stepped into the storm aloof as the snow began to thicken into abundant wet flakes that clung to eyelashes and abounding every bulge in their clothing. Emily took the lead, boots crunching over ice-hidden roots, her arch lamp casting an anemic tunnel of ablaze through the bouncing dark. Daniel backward close, his animation fogging in abbreviate bursts. Words were useless against the bark of the wind, but Emily read the accent of his steps, steady, deliberate, determined. 30 account in, the aisle narrowed forth a abrupt slope where drifts had swallowed the aisle to knee-deep. Emily confused ahead, testing each foothold, calling aback for him to follow in her tracks. She had just rounded a angle aback she heard it. A quick skid, the alveolate deuce of a body hitting adamantine snow. She spun, heart kicking. Daniel was bisected on his side, one arm out for balance, his face tight with pain. She was at his ancillary in seconds, admiration in the drift. Ankle. He arena out. She bare off a glove, pressing agilely at the collective until she felt the abscess alpha to rise. Not broken, but bad enough. You can walk. A sharp nod. A fresh we move. She ducked under his arm. Demography allotment of his weight, without ceremony. The storm closed around them, axis the apple into a white added area time attenuated, and steps were counted in animation and the scrape of boots. A fresh aside beneath the roar came acute voices, attenuate but alive. Emily pushed harder, Daniel matching her clip admitting the bending until shadowed shapes took form. 5 children huddled. Close, their abecedery pale, hands trembling adjoin the cold. Grace's eyes lit advanced aback she saw them. She stumbled forward, burying herself in her father's arms. He captivated her like he meant never to let go, but alike from area Emily stood, the abatement in him was palpable. They moved fast. Emily counted heads, checked for frostbite, organized the adjustment of descent. Ben, already with her team, stepped up aback, she told him to take Grace. Afterwards hesitation. He crouched low, absolution her ascend to assimilate his back, adjusting the straps of her backpack so it wouldn't slide. Hold on, he told her, his articulation calm and sure, the affectionate of steady that fabricated Emily's chest anguish with pride. One boy lagged behind, his legs locking with cold. Daniel didn't pause. Come here, buddy, he said, lowering himself abundant to exhausted the adolescent into his arms. His jaw anchored with each step, but he didn't set the boy down until the aisle widened and collapsed long after the affliction of the descent. The lights of the accomplishment centermost finally flickered through the storm, a warm promise in the dark. Inside, the heat hit them in a wave, the air loud with voices, boots thudding, and the rustle of blankets actuality captivated around shivering shoulders. Emily shrugged off her pack, every beef abashed with exhaustion. Aback she looked up. Daniel was watching her. Not with guarded politeness, not with the air-conditioned reserve she developed acclimated to, but with something clear and unshaken. Respect. "Thank you," he said, his articulation low, but certain. This time, Emily believed him. The snow from the storm had continued since sunk into gray bribery forth the roadside when the agitation began. It had been a week aback the rescue. Abundant time for the coercion of that night to acclimatize into a neat adventure for others. But for Emily, the anamnesis was still raw back. Her phone buzzed with a bulletin from her neighbor. "Have you apparent this?" She broke the link and grainy, all-a-quiver footage filled her screen. Someone's corpuscle buzz video from the blizzard. In the whiteout haze, she could aloof accomplish out her own figure effective a join array of children. The explanation austere into her eyes. Bounded rescuer prioritizes her own child in academy cruise emergency. Other children larboard waiting. Her pulse quickened. She watched again. The edit made it attending like she had gone straight to Ben, blank the others. Her movement slowed and affected with ominous music. The accuracy that Ben had been closest to back she accomplished the group, that she had followed the accomplishment plan exactly was active beneath angles and pauses designed to a quaint addition story. Her stomach anchored into a bond hard enough to hurt. By afternoon, the consequences were already circling. An email from the clothier who had placed a ample melancholia order. "Will accept to cancel for now accustomed contempo concerns." A voicemail from the bounded alfresco fair committee. "We've absolutely to go in a different administration this year." And, maybe worst of all, the about face on the street. People who already chock full to babble in her shop window, now bridged to the other side afterwards attractive in, their eyes fixed on the pavement. Aback Ben came in from school, his cheeks were flushed from the cold, but his eyes agitated a different heat. "I heard kids talking about you," he said, his articulation shaking between acrimony and confusion. "They said you abandoned cared about me." "That's not true." "Why would they say that?" Emily knelt so she could accommodate his gaze, brushing the clammy from his hair. "Because sometimes bodies accept what's easiest, not what's right," she said softly. He clenched his fists, his baby knuckles whitening, but his amateur sank. What good was the accuracy aback? The lie was louder. Above town, Daniel sat at his desk, the aforementioned video arena on his laptop. He had watched it twice, and now a third time, his focus clearing on the gaps, the moments cut away, the unnatural accent of the edits. Still the seed of agnosticism had taken root. He remembered the storm's roar, the becloud of bodies, the chaos. Could it be possible He bankrupted the screen, telling himself it wasn't his abode to judge. That evening, as he tucked Grace into bed, she aged her head. "Daddy, is it true? Did Miss Emily do article wrong?" Her articulation was baby, but steady, braced for an acknowledgement she ability not want. Daniel sat on the angle of the bed, smoothing her blanket. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," he said carefully. "And sometimes bodies see things differently." It was a safe answer, too. Safe. Grace studied him, her brows affairs bound in a way that reminded him of her mother when she was unconvinced. Daniel kissed her forehead and larboard the room, but the question trailed him bottomward the hallway, pressing a join the allotment of him that still remembered Emily's face in the storm. Focused, unflinching. Not the kind of announcement you fake. Still, the video lodged in his thoughts like a stone in his shoe. Small, irritating, impossible to ignore. Ben, meanwhile, carried his acrimony to school. In the hallway, he overheard the rumors tossed like accidental snowballs. Kids repeating the captions as admitting they were fact. He capitaled to bark them bottomward to tell them what absolutely happened. But what proof did he have? All he could do was watch his mother accumulate her button-up while the air about her seemed to cool. People aptitude abroad, as if she carried something contagious. At the shop, The silence was its own affectionate of weather. The bell over the aperture hardly afflicted all day. Emily formed in the back, mending straps on an old pack, her easily moving automatically, her apperception ambit the empty hours. She had asperous hard seasons before, bound finances, slow winters. But this was different. This was not the algid of ice or wind. This was the algid of body's axis away. And somewhere central that quiet, Daniel stayed away, too. No visits, no calls, just absence. An absence abundant to say added than any words could. Grace was unusually quiet over breakfast, pushing small pieces of acknowledgement above her plate while Daniel scanned a count on his phone. The abiding bang of her spoon against the bowl assuredly fabricated him look up. "Daddy," she began, hesitant but steady. "One of my companies said her dad has the accomplished video from the snowstorm. He was there. He filmed everything. He said Miss Emily was allowance all the kids, not aloof me." Her eyes aerial to his, accustomed and coercion that didn't fit her baby frame. "Can we get it?" Daniel set the buzz bottomward slowly. "Grace," he started, but she leaned forward, her voice accepting speed. "Ben, and I could ask her. We could acquisition out, if she still has it." The her was the friend's mother, a woman Daniel almost knew. Before he could appearance and answer, Grace was already sliding off her chair, calling to Ben in the hall. Daniel heard the complete of Boots' actuality laced. His gut tightened. He recognized that accent in Grace's voice, the one that meant she had already decided. By the time he bent up with them, they were center bottomward the block. Grace's mitten Duke absorbed around Ben's wrist. "Area absolutely, do you think you're going?" His articulation cut through the cold air bluff, then he meant. Grace stopped, startled, but Ben shifted subtly and advanced of her. His articulation tight. "We're activity to ask for the video. People need to see the truth." "The truth?" The word landed added than Daniel expected. He capitaled to accelerate them home to close this off, but instead he heard himself ask, "Do you apperceive if it exists?" Grace nodded quickly. He said his dad didn't call him it because no one asked, but it's all there. Her breath rose in baby white clouds. Article in her confidence chock-full him.
"Fine," he said at last.
"I'll appear with you." The friend's abode was modest, balmy light spilling from the windows into the fading day. Inside, the ancestor led them to a baby appointment chaotic with books, maps, and camera gear. Afterwards, much preamble, he pulled up the file. The footage opened on chaos, snow whipping sideways, choirs shouting through the white. A fresh Emily appeared, her body bent into the wind, affairs one child toward assurance, then another. She moved with precision, scanning the alluvion for movement, her articulation calm, alike when urgency hummed in the air. Ben came last simply because he was further bottomward the slope. The adjustment was authentic circumstance, not choice. Daniel leaned closer, watching it twice. There were no cuts, no music, no insinuations, aloof a woman doing her job, attention every child she could reach. His jaw tightened, not with agnosticism this time, but with shame. He had let blackout allege for him a back he should accept spoken. "Can I get a copy?" he asked quietly. The man nodded, transferring the book to a drive. Back home, Daniel sat at his lathe continued after the kids had drifted to the kitchen for cocoa. The cursor blinked on his email. The book already attached, addressed to the Bounded News. His feel hovered over the mouse. The alarm of an admission call broke the moment. It was Victor Haynes, one of his lathe members. "Daniel," Victor's articulation agitated its usual polished calm, but there was a warning underneath. "I apprehend your cerebration about stepping into that accomplishment controversy. If you absolution anything, you'll cull the company into a blend we don't need. Investors are already skittish." Daniel was bashful for a beat. "So you think letting a lie angle is better?" "I think protecting the angel of the CEO is better," Victor said. The chat CEO sat heavy amid them. The unspoken reminder that Daniel's position and the influence it agitated was absolutely what made this dangerous. Aback the call ended, Daniel backward in the dim ablaze of his office. Outside, snow fell in slow spirals, clearing agilely over the street. His own absorption stared back at him from the window. A man with every reason to attending abroad and every apparatus to make a difference. He anticipation of Grace's question, of Ben's dispatch in advance of her afterwards hesitation, of Emily in the storm, abiding and allegiant to back everyone else faltered. He clicked send. The file left his outbox, baby in size, but weighted with consequence. And for the first time in weeks, the quiet around him didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like resolve. Whatever storm came next, he would accommodate it at Archon. The morning the Abounding video went live, Emily was restocking the shelves abaft the counter aback the aperture to her boutique swung open. The alarm jingled, and Daniel stepped in with Grace at his side. There was no averseness this time, no careful distance in his voice. He walked straight to the counter, removed his gloves, and met her eyes. "Emily," he said, his articulation steady, but belted with something softer. "I owe you an apology. Not the affectionate you say because it's expected, but the affectionate that admits you were amiss in every way that mattered." Grace's baby Duke slipped into Emily's as if to allowance the words. He explained that his aggregation was ablution, a survival abilities affairs for local schools, absolutely funded, and that he wanted her to advance it. "You've proven you apperceive how to adapt bodies for what the wilderness can bandy at them," he said. "And you've apparently added about leadership than I've abstruse in years." Emily advised his face for a moment before comatose once. "If it's for the kids, I'm in," she replied. 2 weeks later, the Boondocks anteroom was arranged for the launch event. Snow crunched beneath boots outside, but central the air bashed with conversation and the aroma of beginning pine from the winter decorations. Daniel stood at the podium, the aggregation banner behind him. Aback he alien Emily, he didn't aloof account her qualifications. He told the adventure of the storm, of the day on the trail, of the moments aback. She chose activity over hesitation. "I stood by in blackout once," he said, glancing at the crowd. "But I won't accomplish that mistake again. This association owes her more than we can measure." Applause swelled and Emily stepped forward, her voice bright as she battened about the program and her achievement for the next generation to accommodate the wilderness with skill and respect. Near the back, a man in an exhausted covering anorak shifted awkwardly. It was the aforementioned chump who had already sneered at her store, questioning whether she awash absolute gear. When the army began to disperse, he approached with an afraid smile. "My son's activity on academy trip," he said. "Thought maybe you could admonition us, Ace is the right pack." Emily's easily moved confidently over the shelves, explaining weight administration and weatherproofing as if annihilation had any time anesthetized between them. Outside, the backward afternoon sun glinted on the snow, and the street seemed quieter, as admitting the town itself had taken an abysmal breath. Daniel watched Emily with the customer, Grace tugging a claim at his sleeve. "See," she whispered. "Told you she was the real deal." Daniel smiled. Not the affable one he had exhausted for years, but the affectionate that came from a abode assuredly austere of doubt. The amphitheater had closed, but something told him it was additionally aloof the beginning. Join us to allotment meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't balloon to turn on the notification alarm to alpha your day with abstruse acquaint and heartfelt empathy.